Admiral Jake Morrison felt the cold metal of the ship's railing under his rough hands. The bridge of the Iron Haven was buzzing with activity, but everyone went quiet when the emergency signal came through their communication system. The sound was scratchy and filled with static, but the message was crystal clear. A tall alien stood in front of the main screen. It looked like a giant bug walking on two legs, with thin arms that shook as it spoke. This was one of the Galactic Council's top diplomats, and Jake had never seen one of them look so scared before. "Admiral Morrison," the alien's voice cracked. "With fear, we need your help. The sanctuary worlds are in terrible danger. The Korthok pirates have already destroyed 3 entire star systems. They're moving toward the peaceful worlds, and we can't stop them." Jake crossed his arms and listened carefully. He had heard about the Korthok before. They were brutal space pirates who traveled in huge fleets, taking whatever they wanted and killing anyone who got in their way. But the sanctuary worlds were different from other places in the galaxy. "Tell me about these worlds," Jake said, his voice steady and calm. The alien's bug-like eyes seemed to get bigger with worry. "On Shimmer Prime, there live the Velinari people. They look like living crystals, beautiful and clear like diamonds. But they're incredibly fragile. Even the sound of our spaceship engines flying overhead can make their bodies crack and break into pieces. They literally shatter from loud noises." Lieutenant Emma Brooks, who was Jake's tactical officer, started, pulling up star maps on her computer screen. She was young but smart, and Jake trusted her judgment completely. As she worked, colorful dots appeared, showing where all the different worlds were located. And on Cloud 9, the alien continued, live the Wisp colonies. They're not solid, like us. They're made of gas and float around like living clouds. If we bring our big military ships too close to their planet, the gravity from our vessels will tear them apart. They'll just dissolve into nothing. Jake walked over to look at the star charts Emma was showing him. Each dot on the screen represented billions of innocent lives. These weren't warrior races or advanced civilizations with powerful weapons. These were gentle beings who had never hurt anyone in their entire existence. Our regular military ships are too big, too loud, and too dangerous, the alien explained, wringing its thin hands together. Every time we try to help, we end up hurting the very people we're trying to save. Our weapons are too powerful, our engines are too noisy, and our ships are too heavy. Commander Tyler Walsh looked up from his engineering station. Tyler was a big guy with grease-stained hands who could fix anything that broke. "Sir," he said, "they're specifically asking for the Deathworlder fleet. They know exactly who we are and what we can do." Jake nodded slowly. The Deathworlder fleet wasn't like the fancy ships of the Galactic Council. His ships were old, patched up, and looked like they might fall apart at any moment. But they were crewed by the toughest people in the galaxy, humans and other species who came from the most dangerous planets imaginable. These were people who grew up on worlds where the air was poisonous, where the gravity could crush normal beings, where the weather could kill you in seconds. They were survivors who had learned to be incredibly careful and precise because one small mistake meant death. The crystalline people, the gas cloud colonies, the plant beings on the third world, Jake said, thinking out loud. They're all incredibly delicate, aren't they? Yes, the alien replied. They're like living works of art, beautiful, peaceful, and completely defenseless. The Korthok pirates want to capture them and sell them as slaves or use their special abilities for profit. The crystal people can heal others with their touch. The gas beings can predict the future. The plant people can grow medicine that cures any disease. Jake understood now. This wasn't just about stopping pirates. This was about protecting the most precious and vulnerable beings in the entire galaxy. Beings who had never learned to fight because they had never needed to. "Tyler," Jake called out, "send a message to Captain Mike Davis on the Storm Runner and Commander Lisa Park on the Void Walker. Tell them to get their crews ready for immediate departure. We're going to show everyone what happens when Death decide to protect the innocent." The alien diplomat looked confused. "But Admiral, your ships are so small compared to our military vessels. How can you succeed where we have failed?" Jake smiled for the first time since the conversation started. Because sometimes the most dangerous people in the galaxy are also the most gentle when it matters. We know how to be deadly, but we also know how to be careful. And right now, careful is exactly what those innocent people need. The human fleet that gathered at the edge of sanctuary space looked like a collection of junkyard scraps compared to the shiny, perfect ships of the Galactic Navy. Captain Mike Davis's vessel, the Storm Runner, had deep gouges and burn marks all across its hull from years of dangerous asteroid mining work. You could see where metal plates had been welded over holes, and the paint was chipped and faded from countless battles with space debris. Commander Lisa Park's ship, the Voidwalker, looked even stranger. It had been completely rebuilt, with special air filtering systems that could handle the poisonous atmosphere of New Sulfur, one of the most toxic planets in known space. Strange tubes and vents stuck out from its sides like mechanical tentacles, and the whole thing had a yellowish tint from chemical stains. "Admiral," came the voice of Sergeant Kate Miller through the communication system. "The Council observers are now aboard each of our ships. They're watching everything we do, and honestly, sir, they look pretty worried about our methods." Jake Morrison couldn't help but grin a little bit. Earlier that morning, the alien observers had watched his engineering crew work on their equipment. The aliens had been shocked when the humans casually talked about acceptable risk levels and backup plans for when things go wrong. What really surprised them was seeing human-made equipment that looked like it was held together with tape and hope, but somehow worked better than expensive military gear. One of the alien observers, a purple creature with 4 arms, had asked Chief Engineer Alex Turner how his sound dampening equipment worked. Alex had just shrugged and said, "Well, if it breaks, we'll fix it with whatever we can find. That's how we've always done things." The alien had looked horrified at this casual approach to life and death situations. As the human fleet moved closer to Shimmer Prime, the home planet of the Crystal People, Lieutenant Emma Brooks pulled up the tactical display on the main screen. What they saw made everyone on the bridge go quiet. Dozens of large Korthok pirate ships had completely surrounded the beautiful planet. But worse than that, each pirate ship had massive sonic projection devices pointed directly at the surface. "Those are sound weapons," Emma explained to the gathered officers. "They're not trying to destroy the planet. They're using noise to keep the Crystal People frozen in place." Jake understood immediately. The Velinary people were so sensitive to sound that even a loud conversation could crack their crystal bodies. The pirates had figured out the perfect way to control them. By filling the air with threatening sounds, they had made it impossible for the Crystal People to move, flee, or fight back. They were prisoners in their own bodies. "It's like holding a knife to someone's throat," muttered Commander Tyler Walsh. "Except the knife is made of sound waves." Jake turned to his chief engineer. "Alex, what do you think? Can we help them?" Lieutenant Alex Turner scratched his chin and studied the display. Alex was the kind of guy who could build a spaceship engine out of spare parts and chewing gum. His hands were permanently stained with grease, and he had scars from a dozen different industrial accidents, but he was the best engineer Jake had ever worked with. "Sir, I think we can adapt our mining sound dampeners for this job. Give me about 2 hours, and I can convert our industrial noise reduction equipment into precision sound barriers. My engineering team has experience working in complete silence. We've had to do repair work in unstable asteroid mines where even a small vibration could cause cave-ins that would kill everyone." This was exactly what Jake had hoped to hear. Mining crews learned to work without making any noise because their lives depended on it. One wrong sound could bring tons of rock crashing down on their heads. Commander Walsh stepped forward. "Admiral, I've been coordinating with our marine units. Captain Rodriguez and his soldiers have been practicing what they call ghost boarding techniques. They can get onto enemy ships without making any sound, any vibration, or leaving any trace that they were ever there. They move like shadows. The alien observers looked at each other with obvious confusion. One of them, a tall being with tentacles instead of arms, spoke up. "But Admiral Morrison, how can your small, damaged ships succeed where our advanced military has failed?" Jake looked out at his fleet of scarred, patched-up vessels filled with people who had survived the worst conditions imaginable. "Because we've learned something that your perfect military never had to learn. We know how to be gentle when gentleness is the most important thing in the universe. We know how to move quietly because noise meant death where we came from. And we know how to fix anything because throwing it away and buying a new one was never an option." The alien shook its tentacles in what might have been disagreement. "But your equipment looks so primitive, so crude." "Maybe it looks crude," Jake replied, "but it works when it needs to work. And more importantly, we know how to make it work even when it's broken. That's the difference between us and your fancy military. When their perfect equipment fails, they're helpless. When our rough equipment fails, we just fix it and keep going." The rescue operation at Shimmer Prime turned into something beautiful to watch, like a deadly dance performed in complete silence. The human fighter ships had been completely rebuilt by Chief Engineer Alex Turner and his team. They had removed the normal engines and replaced them with special quiet propulsion systems that made absolutely no sound as they moved through space. These small ships drifted between the Korthok vessels like ghosts, invisible and silent. Marine Captain Ben Rodriguez was leading the boarding operations, and he had trained his soldiers in a very special way. One of his demolitions experts, a tough woman named Joey Chen, had been born completely deaf. Over the years, she had taught the entire Marine unit how to communicate using only hand signals. Now, as they moved through the pirate ships, not a single word was spoken out loud. Rodriguez raised his hand and made a quick gesture. His Marines immediately understood. "Move to the engine room. Disable the power, but don't hurt anyone unless absolutely necessary." Another series of hand signals meant, "Watch for booby traps. Stay low, and remember that sound is the enemy." "This is incredible," Lieutenant Emma Brooks whispered as quietly as possible while watching the tactical display on the bridge. One by one, the red dots representing Korthok ships started going dark on the screen. The pirates inside had no idea what was happening to them. Their ships just stopped working, their weapons powered down, and their sonic projection devices went silent. The beautiful part was that the crystal people on the planet's surface immediately began to move again. Without the horrible sound weapons keeping them frozen in terror, the Velinari could finally flee to safety. Their crystal bodies caught the light from their sun and sparkled like living diamonds as they ran to underground shelters that the humans had located using their mining scanners. Jake Morrison watched the entire operation with pride. His people were doing exactly what they did best, solving impossible problems with creativity and determination. The Galactic Council's fancy military would have tried to blast their way through the pirate fleet, probably destroying half the planet in the process. But the humans were like surgeons, carefully removing the threat without harming anyone they were trying to protect. The second part of the mission brought them to Cloud 9, home of the Wisp colonies. These were some of the strangest beings in the galaxy. They weren't solid like humans, or even crystal-like, like the Velinari. The Wisp people were made entirely of gas, floating through space like living clouds of colored mist. They were incredibly intelligent and could even predict future events, but they were also extremely fragile. "All right, people, this is where we really show our skills," announced Captain Mike Davis over the communication system. His voice was filled with confidence because this was exactly the kind of challenge his crew had been dealing with for years. Davis's ship, the Storm Runner, had spent the last decade working in asteroid fields and dangerous nebulae, where space was filled with floating rocks, gas clouds, and deadly radiation. His pilot, Lieutenant Tommy Park, could navigate through a field of spinning asteroids while blindfolded. His engineers knew how to create gentle air currents that could guide floating objects without damaging them. The problem at Cloud 9 was that the Korthok pirates had surrounded the Wisp colonies with ships that used gravity weapons. These devices created artificial gravity fields that would tear the gaseous Wisp people apart like a strong wind ripping apart smoke. The gentle beings were trapped, unable to escape without being destroyed. "Watch and learn," Davis said to the alien observers on his ship. His crew activated their modified atmospheric processors, the same machines they normally use to clean poisonous air. But instead of filtering air, they used them to create incredibly gentle air currents that could guide the panicked Wisp entities away from danger. It was like watching an expert shepherd guide a flock of sheep, except the sheep were made of living gas and the shepherd was a scarred mining ship. The humans created safe pathways of moving air that the Wisp people could follow to escape the gravity weapons. At the same time, human fighters attacked the pirate ships, but they were careful not to create any explosions or energy bursts that might hurt the delicate gas beings. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Mitchell led the ground assault team, and her Marines were equipped with environmental suits designed for the most toxic worlds in the galaxy. When the Korthok pirates started using chemical weapons, releasing poisonous gas clouds that would have killed normal soldiers instantly, Mitchell's team just walked right through them. "Chemical attack detected," reported one of her Marines over the radio, his voice completely calm. "Looks like sulfur-based nerve gas. My suit's filters are handling it fine." For these soldiers, breathing poison was just another Tuesday. They had grown up on worlds where the air itself could kill you, where radiation levels would fry normal people in minutes, and where the rain was made of acid. The pirates' chemical weapons were actually less dangerous than the morning air on their home planets. The alien observers couldn't believe what they were seeing. Where the Galactic Council's military would have needed massive ships, heavy weapons, and thousands of soldiers, the humans were solving the problem with creativity, teamwork, and equipment that looked like it belonged in a scrapyard, but worked better than anything the galaxy's best engineers had ever built. "How are they doing this?" asked one of the observers, a blue-skinned alien with large eyes. Jake Morrison smiled as he watched his people work. "Because we learned a long time ago that the best way to protect something precious is to be more careful than anyone thinks possible." The final mission brought Jake Morrison and his fleet to Haven's Rest, and what they found there made even these tough Deathworld survivors feel sick to their stomachs. This planet was home to the Gentle Ones, a species of plant people who looked like walking trees made of living light. Their bodies glowed with soft, beautiful colors that changed based on their emotions and thoughts. These beings were completely peaceful and had the amazing ability to heal any injury or disease just by touching someone with their glowing hands. But the Korthok pirates had turned Haven's Rest into a nightmare. They had built massive artificial suns all around the planet, giant burning lights that were 10 times brighter than the natural sun. The plant people needed gentle, soft light to survive, like flowers in a garden. These artificial suns were slowly cooking them alive, while the pirates harvested their healing cells to sell on the black market. "This is pure evil," muttered Commander Tyler Walsh as he looked at the scanner readings. The artificial suns were so bright and hot that they were literally burning the plant people from the inside out. The Gentle Ones were trying to hide underground, but even there, the intense light was killing them slowly. Jake Morrison stared at the tactical display and made a decision that surprised everyone. "We're going in at night," he announced. "Complete darkness. No artificial lighting, no energy. Weapons anywhere near the planet's surface. We do this the old way, using nothing but starlight and our own determination." The alien observers looked confused. One of them, a gray creature with multiple eyes, spoke up. "Admiral, how can you fight a battle in complete darkness? Your soldiers won't be able to see anything." That's when Commander Lisa Park stepped forward with a confidence that made everyone pay attention. Lisa had grown up on Titan's Edge, an ice world that was locked in permanent winter night. For 6 months out of every year, her planet received no sunlight at all, just the faint glow of distant stars. "My crew has been working in total darkness for over 15 years, Lisa explained. "We navigate by reading star positions, heat signatures, and gravitational changes. We can feel the pull of planets and moons just by the way our ships drift through space. Darkness isn't our enemy, it's our friend." Her engineering team had learned to repair spaceships and mining equipment using nothing but starlight and their sense of touch. They could tell the difference between different types of metal just by feeling them, and they knew the sound that every bolt and screw made when it was properly tightened. As the human fleet moved closer to Haven's Rest, something amazing happened. Communications Officer Danny Foster, who was monitoring all radio frequencies, suddenly got excited. "Admiral, I'm picking up signals from the planet's surface. The Gentle Ones are trying to communicate with us, but they're not using radio waves, they're using light patterns." Jake looked at the main screen, and sure enough, he could see faint pulses of colored light coming from the planet's surface. The plant people were flashing different colors in specific patterns, like a code made of living light. "Get me Lieutenant Kate Miller," Jake ordered. Kate was one of his smartest officers, someone who had learned to speak 6 different alien languages during her time in the Deathworld fleet. If anyone could figure out what the Gentle Ones were trying to say, it would be her. Kate worked for 3 hours straight, watching the light patterns and trying to understand their meaning. Finally, she figured it out. "Sir, they're telling us where the pirates have their main control stations, the ones controlling the artificial suns. The Gentle Ones are giving us a map made of light." This was incredible. The plant people weren't just victims waiting to be rescued. They were actively helping their rescuers, using their natural ability to create light as a way to communicate vital information about their enemies. Jake realized that this changed everything. Instead of fighting blind, they could coordinate their attack with the Gentle Ones themselves. The plant people would guide them, using their light signals, showing them where to attack and where to avoid. But there was still one huge problem. The artificial suns were so bright and hot that any human ship that got too close would be destroyed, and any marine who tried to land on the surface would be burned alive before they could reach the pirate installations. That's when Jake came up with the most dangerous plan of his entire career. "We're going to create an artificial eclipse," he announced. "We'll position our ships between the artificial suns and the planet's surface, using our own hulls as shields to block the killing light." Commander Walsh looked at him with shock. "Sir, that means our ships will take the full force of those artificial suns. The heat could melt our hulls. Then we'll have to work fast," Jake replied. "Our ships are built to handle the heat of asteroid mining and solar flare exposure. We can take the punishment long enough to get our Marines on the ground." The plan was incredibly risky. The human ships would fly directly between the artificial suns and the planet, creating shadows on the surface where the Marines could land safely. But this meant that the ships themselves would be exposed to temperatures hot enough to melt steel. As the attack began, the human fleet moved into position like a coordinated dance. Commander Park's ship, the Voidwalker, took position, blocking the largest artificial sun. Captain Davis positioned the Stormrunner to create a shadow over the main pirate installation. Jake's own ship, the Iron Haven, moved to protect the area where most of the surviving Gentle Ones were hiding. The temperature inside the ships started rising immediately. Warning alarms began blaring as the hull temperatures climbed toward dangerous levels, but the crews held their positions, sweating and working frantically to keep their ships from melting, while their Marines landed on the planet's surface below. On the ground, the Marines moved like ghosts through the artificial twilight created by their ship's shadows. The gentle ones guided them with soft pulses of colored light, showing them exactly where to go and what to attack. It was like following a path made of living rainbows through the darkness. 3 weeks had passed since the successful rescue of the Sanctuary Worlds, and Admiral Jake Morrison found himself standing in the most important room in the galaxy. The Galactic Council chamber was enormous, with representatives from hundreds of different species sitting in curved rows that stretched up toward a domed ceiling covered in stars. Every pair of eyes, tentacles, or sensor organs was focused on him as he prepared to deliver his final mission report. Jake looked down at the data pad in his hands, but he didn't really need it. The numbers were burned into his memory because they were almost too good to believe. In 3 separate rescue operations involving the most delicate and vulnerable species in the known galaxy, his ragtag fleet of Deathworld survivors had achieved something that military historians would study for centuries. "Honorable delegates," Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's advanced sound system. "I'm here to report the final statistics from Operation Sanctuary Shield. 0 human casualties, 0 friendly fire incidents, and a 99.7% survival rate among the populations we were sent to rescue." A murmur of amazement rippled through the assembled aliens, the insectoid delegate who had first brought them the mission. Request clicked his mandibles together in what Jake had learned was their species' way of showing extreme surprise. "We've discovered something very important during these operations," Jake continued, looking around the chamber at all the different alien faces. "True strength isn't about how much firepower you can bring to a fight. It's not about having the biggest ships or the most advanced weapons. Real strength is knowing when not to use force at all." This statement caused quite a stir among the delegates. Many of them came from military backgrounds where overwhelming force was considered the solution to every problem. The idea that restraint could be more powerful than aggression was completely foreign to their way of thinking. Jake went on to explain how his crews had approached each rescue mission. Instead of trying to outmuscle the Korthok pirates, they had used precision, patience, and creativity. They had turned their own survival skills and rough world experience into tools for protecting others. After the formal report was finished, Jake was approached by several council members who wanted to know what his people were doing now. The answer made him proud of his crew all over again. Captain Mike Davis had taken it upon himself to convert all the captured Korthak pirate ships into mobile medical stations. Instead of weapons and prisoner cells, these vessels now carried advanced hospital equipment and healing facilities. Davis and his engineering team were traveling from world to world, providing free medical care to anyone who needed it, especially the species that had been hurt during the pirate attacks. Commander Lisa Park had started something even more ambitious. She was working with the Galactic Council's peacekeepers, teaching them the precision rescue techniques that the human fleet had developed. Alien soldiers who had spent their careers learning how to destroy things were now learning how to save them instead. The Marines who had moved through pirate ships like silent ghosts were now instructors at the Galactic Peace Academy. Captain Ben Rodriguez was teaching entire classes of alien peacekeepers how to complete missions without causing harm to innocent bystanders. His lesson plans included everything from silent communication, techniques to non-violent shipboarding, procedures, but the most touching part of the aftermath wasn't what the humans were doing. It was how the rescued species had chosen to remember their saviors. The crystalline Velinary people had a tradition of creating complex musical compositions, using the natural sounds their crystal bodies made when they moved. They had composed an entire symphony in honor of the human fleet, calling it the Song of the Silent Giants Who Moved Like Whispers. When performed, the music sounded like wind chimes mixed with church bells, creating a melody so beautiful that it could bring tears to the eyes of anyone who heard it. The gaseous wisp colonies had an even more permanent way of showing their gratitude. They had collectively decided to rename one of the most beautiful nebulae in their star system, the Human Light. a swirling cloud of colored gases that would shine in the darkness for millions of years as a monument to their rescuers. Most incredible of all were the living murals created by the Gentle Ones on Haven's Rest. These plant people had the ability to grow their bodies into any shape they wanted, and entire communities of them had grown together to form massive artistic displays that could be seen from space. Instead of showing humans as the feared Deathworlders that most of the galaxy knew them as, these living paintings depicted them as gentle guardians watching over small, precious things. Standing in his quarters aboard the Iron Haven after the council meeting, Jake looked out at his expanded fleet. What had started as 3 battered ships crewed by survivors and misfits had grown into something much larger. 12 more vessels had joined them, each one crewed by volunteers from harsh worlds who had heard about the sanctuary missions and wanted to be part of something meaningful. "Admiral," came the voice of Lieutenant Emma Brooks as she entered his quarters with a new data pad. "We've received another mission request. There are reports of slavers threatening a colony world called New Harmony. The inhabitants are empathic, children who can feel the emotions of everyone around them. They're so sensitive that they become physically ill when exposed to violence or anger." Jake took the data pad and read through the mission briefing. It was another impossible situation that would require the kind of precise, gentle approach that only his Deathworld crews could provide. These weren't ordinary children, but beings whose minds were so connected to others that witnessing cruelty could literally kill them. "Signal the fleet, Emma," Jake said, feeling that familiar sense of purpose filling his chest. "Tell them we have another family to protect." As he looked out at the stars through his cabin window, Jake reflected on how much had changed in just a few short weeks. The Deathworlder Protection Corps, as they were now officially known, had found their true calling in the galaxy. They weren't just survivors anymore. They weren't just the tough guys who did the jobs nobody else could handle. They had become something better. In a universe full of incredible wonders and beautiful, fragile beings, someone needed to stand guard over those too precious to defend themselves. And it turned out that the most dangerous people in the galaxy were also the most capable of being gentle, when gentleness was exactly what the universe needed.